Pretty epic, as you can probably tell by looking at my screen today. We're going to be talking about angles. Now, as we discussed in our last geometry lesson, angles are the space between two line segments that meet at a point. Now, the point where these line segments meet is called the vertex, and the angle is represented here in orange. Now, we measure angles in degrees. Degrees measure how open the angle is. And so you can see here that this angle is 40 degrees. This angle is 67 degrees. We'll get further into that in a moment. We classify different types of angles by measuring their degrees. So the different types of angles we're going to be talking about today are acute, right angles, obtuse angles, flat angles, and reflex angles. We're also going to talk about complementary angles and supplementary angles. Don't worry if those words sound a little confusing right now. They will make a lot more sense very soon. So I'm going to start by talking about acute angles. Acute angles are any angle that measures more than 0 degrees and less than 90 degrees. So if we do this, doesn't look like much, but suddenly this is an acute angle. It measures 1 degree, which is between 0 and 90. This is also an acute angle. All of these are acute angles until we get here. This is also an acute angle because it is between 0 and 90. Now, if we go 1 degree further, suddenly we're looking at a right angle. Right angles always measure 90 degrees exactly. Right angles look like the angles in a rectangle or a square. They are always 90 degrees. Now, what happens if we go further? Suddenly, we are looking at an obtuse angle. Obtuse angles measure higher than 90 degrees and lower than 180 degrees. So this is an obtuse angle. So is this. All the way, all of these are obtuse angles until we get here. This is still an obtuse angle. Now, what happens if we add 1 more degree? At 180 degrees, we are suddenly looking at a flat angle. Flat angles always measure at 180 degrees. What happens if we keep going? Suddenly, we are looking at a reflex angle. Reflex angles are more than 180 degrees and less than 360 degrees. Let's take a look at some more reflex angles. Yep. Every single one of these angles, all of these numbers, these are all reflex angles. All the way until you get to here. This is still a reflex angle. What if we go 1 more degree all the way around? 360. This is a full rotation angle. You can see that it makes a lot of sense to think about angles as part of a circle. What happens if we keep going? Suddenly, we're back to acute angles. So, to review, acute, right, obtuse, flat, and reflex all the way to a full rotation angle. Does that make sense? Awesome. Now, I want to start talking about complementary angles. What does that mean? Let's take a look. By the way, this website is amazing. If you want to use this as a tool when you're studying angles, I highly recommend. Here is the address. You can type that into your browser. Complementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So we can see that this 38-degree angle and this 52-degree angle add up to a 90-degree angle, or a right angle. If we adjust it, now we have a 70-degree angle and a 20-degree angle. 70 plus 20 is 90. No matter what, complementary angles are always going to add up to 90 degrees. Now, what happens if one is missing? Oof. How do we find angle A? Well, we know that this angle is 55 degrees. And we know that the full complementary angle is 90 degrees. So how do we find angle A? We take the full 90-degree angle. We subtract what we already know. 90 minus 55 equals 35. Let's try another one. What if I put it here? So we know that both of these angles add up to 90 degrees, and we know that this one is 65. How do we find angle B? Well, we take the 90-degree angle, 90, and we subtract what we already know, 65. 90 minus 65 is 25 degrees. You want to look at one more before we move on? I'll put it right around here. Okay, so we know that these complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. We know that one of them is 17 degrees. How do we find angle A? That's right. We take the 90-degree angle, 90, and we subtract what we already know, 17. That leaves us with the rest of the angle. 90 minus 17 is 73. Those are complementary angles. Now, what does supplementary angles mean? Do you guys think you know based on just this image? If you said that supplementary angles always add up to 180 degrees, you are absolutely correct. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. Just like what we're looking at now, 90 degrees plus 90 degrees equals 180 degrees, makes a flat angle. What if we look at this pair of supplementary angles? Well, we know that this is 180 degrees. We know that this part is 43 degrees. How do we find angle B? That's right. We take 180 and we subtract what we already know. 180 minus 43 is 137. Let's look at another one. What if we take it all the way over here? how do we find angle B? Well, we know that these two supplementary angles add up to 180. So we take 180, we subtract what we already know, which is 162 degrees. 180 minus 162 is 18 degrees. Do we want to try one more? Ooh, put it anywhere random. How about right here? What do you think? We know that these two angles add up to 180 degrees, and we know that the first angle measures 71 degrees. So, how do we find angle B? That's right, 180 minus 71. That gives us 109 degrees. Now, I know it can be a little tricky to remember the difference between complementary and supplementary angles. So let me show you a little trick that I used to use when I was in school. I have the words supplementary and complementary here in front of me on the page. With a few little adjustments, we can make this a really easy tool to remember what these words mean. So if I take this C in complementary, and I kind of do this to it. Do you see what I just did? Do you see what's there? Suddenly we can remember that complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. Does that make sense? Let's take a look at the word supplementary. If I take the S and I keep going, and then I take the U and I keep going, I've got 80. That helps me remember. I can put the 1 here, and suddenly I can remember that complementary angles add up to 180 degrees. Now, I have attached a worksheet to this video that will help you practice on your own identifying the different types of angles. Go ahead and complete that on your own as best you can, and take a pic and send it on over, and I cannot wait to see what you guys have learned. All right, remember, stay safe, and most of all, have fun with it. Bye, Epic.